There's a lie that's been whispered into the ears of men for centuries, a venom wrapped in silk. It's just looking. That's what they say. That's what they teach the boy before he becomes a man. That it's harmless. That a glance is natural. That desire makes you human. But let me tell you something, Filiolo. Nothing about the eyes is innocent. Nothing about them is passive. The eyes are weapons, and every time they wander without command, they betray the mind that holds them. You want to know who a man truly is? Don't look at what he says. Look at what he stares at when he thinks no one's watching. You see, your gaze is the first signal your soul sends to the world. It tells people what you crave, what controls you, what you'd kneel for in silence. A man who doesn't own his gaze is already owned by lust, by weakness, by impulse, and worst of all, by others. A man's downfall rarely starts with a scandal. It starts with the look he allowed himself to take, the one that whispered, "No harm." But it was never about the moment. It's about the signal. That moment tells the body, "The king has fallen asleep. We can move without orders now." And just like that, the palace is invaded from within. Lust doesn't start in the bed, it starts in the eye. Every addiction, every betrayal, every scandal that destroyed a family or a name, it started with one glance that was not denied. Just like a general who fails to discipline his soldiers, a man who fails to discipline his eyes will soon face rebellion from the rest of his soul. His thoughts become wild, his standards become negotiable, his presence loses weight. There's a reason why the old dons, the real men of power, always moved with still eyes, cold, focused, like the barrel of a gun. When they walked into a room, they didn't scan the curves, they scanned the threats, the opportunities, the weaknesses. They didn't look for pleasure, they looked for leverage. And let me say this plain, if you walk into a room and you can't control your eyes, you don't belong in that room, because you're not the hunter, you're the hunted. Men today think freedom is being able to look at anything, anytime, anywhere. But real freedom is when you don't need to, when your eyes serve you, not enslave you, when your gaze becomes a scalpel, not a leaking faucet. You can always tell when a man has been weakened. He loses his stillness. He becomes jittery, distracted. His eyes bounce like dice across the table. And once his eyes are uncontrolled, his decisions follow. He will say yes when he should say no. He will hesitate when he should strike. He will fall silent when he should speak with fire, all because his eyes trained his mind to obey weakness. You want to be respected? Then respect your gaze. Keep it sharp, keep it clean, keep it lethal, because when the eyes are undisciplined, the will becomes a slave, and a man without will is not a man. He's a ghost with skin. There's a critical difference between power and addiction, but most men today, soft, overstimulated, spiritually famished, confuse the two. They think that wanting something makes them powerful, that chasing a woman, an image, a fantasy, is a sign of life. But let me tell you, ragazzo, lust is not life. Lust is death on a slow drip. Lust is not hunger, it's rot. And if you feed it, it doesn't thank you. It buries you. Lust is the only addiction that people praise in public. No one congratulates the alcoholic for drinking more, but lose your self-control over a woman in a red dress, and they call you a man. A joke, a walking contradiction. Because real men don't applaud themselves for falling. They don't call indulgence strength. They call it what it is, mental weakness dressed in pleasure. You know what lust truly is? It's an escape, a way to forget your mission, your pain, your fear. Every time you reach for that screen, that image, that woman you know you don't need, you're trying to flee the battlefield of your own mind. Lust isn't about sex, it's about evasion, a coward's reward. And the tragedy, the pleasure you get, is a leash tightening around your soul. Don't believe me? Look at your discipline after a binge. Look at your focus, your ambition, your edge. Gone like smoke after a bullet. You're slower, weaker. That's not coincidence. That's biology. That's spiritual warfare. That's the cost of pleasure without purpose. You trade the fire of your future for the fog of a moment. And there's something deeper, something darker. Lust is the tool they use to keep you poor, quiet, compliant. They want you addicted. They want you soft. Because a man who's always chasing fantasy will never build reality. He'll never build a family, an empire, a legacy. He'll just keep chasing shadows in silk and wonder why his hands are always empty. You think your lust is private? It's not. People see it. They feel it. In your eyes, in your voice, in your handshake. You lose respect every time you say yes to something you should have crushed. And the worst part? You lose self-respect. You start lying to yourself, telling yourself you're in control, that you can stop whenever you want. But you won't. Because deep down, you've become a beggar. And beggars don't stop. They only switch streets. Desire is a tool. Lust is a thief. A man should have the power to look at what tempts him and walk away without flinching. That's strength. That's what separates the lion from the stray dog. The lion doesn't need to prove he's a predator. He just is. While the stray, he's always sniffing around, always hungry, never feared. You want to command rooms? You want to build empires? You want to speak and have men listen, not because they like you, but because they feel your weight? Then kill your lust. Kill it now, or it will kill you slowly, with a smile on its face and a knife behind its back. Remember this: what you cannot say no to owns you, and anything that owns you can destroy you. Power is not loud. Power is not fast. Power is not even visible to most eyes. Power is quiet, patient, calculated. It sits in silence, watching everyone else play the fool. And in this silent game, your eyes are either your crown or your chains. When a man walks into a room, the room watches him. But what they really watch is where he watches. Where do his eyes go? What do they chase? Who do they undress, or do they command? Your gaze is not a small thing. It is a declaration. And in this life, every glance you throw into the wind is a brick removed from your throne and placed into your prison. Men don't fall because they're too weak to lift weights. They fall because they're too weak to lift their standards. They fall because they confuse indulgence with power. But real power is when you're surrounded by distraction, temptation, opportunity for pleasure, and you don't blink. You see it, you register it, but you don't obey it. You calculate, you choose, you remain still. Let me explain to you how the real men, the capos, the silent wolves, move in the world. They enter a room and their eyes don't flinch. They don't look at what everyone else is looking at. They're reading body language, not bodies. They're scanning for weakness, not cleavage. They're measuring silence, not curves, because they know the moment you look like prey, you stop being the hunter. A man who trains his eyes to only seek pleasure will never see danger until it's already too late. The enemy doesn't always wear a scowl. Sometimes it wears perfume. Sometimes it laughs at your jokes. And if your eyes are too busy admiring the packaging, you'll miss the poison inside. In the old days, in the family, we used to test men not by how they fought, but by how they looked. A man with discipline in his eyes, cold, sharp, slow, he was trusted. He was feared, because it meant he saw what mattered. He wasn't moved by every skirt. He didn't crack under beauty, and that made him dangerous, because nothing could be used against him. But the man who stared too long, who joked too loud when a woman passed, that one we watched carefully, because he wasn't looking at the mission, he was looking for escape. And men who seek escape become liabilities. You can't build a kingdom with men who get distracted by peasants. And let me remind you, women are not the enemy. Lust is, undisciplined attention is. That's the real opponent. Because when you allow your gaze to move without purpose, you start to live without purpose. The eyes teach the mind, and the mind teaches the will. Break the chain at the top, and everything beneath it crumbles. So next time you enter a room, ask yourself, are my eyes hunting, or are they begging? Are they searching for leverage, or leaking my weakness? Because every glance you don't control is a choice between the throne or the cage, between being respected or being seen as another hungry dog waiting for scraps. And when the men who matter, the killers, the kings, the strategists, look at you, they'll know, not from your words, not from your walk, but from your eyes. And by then, it's already too late to fake it. He was sharp, cold-blooded in negotiation, the kind of man you'd trust with money, with muscle, even with silence. I remember the day he walked into my office, 29 years old, clean suit, clean eyes, clean record. He wanted to rise, said he was ready to serve, and he meant it. He had that look, not of ambition, but of hunger, the kind that turns wolves into kings. I gave him work, small at first, pickups, deliveries, collections. He did them all like a machine, no complaints, no mistakes. That kind of man doesn't stay on the ground floor for long. Within a year, I had him in meetings, sitting close, listening, watching, learning. But then, the cracks began. It started with something most men today would call harmless. A glance. One of the accountant's girls, beautiful, no doubt, but not the kind of woman that belonged to a man with purpose. She was flame. And he started playing with matches. I watched it. The change. The silence in him turned into distraction. His cold eyes started warming up in the wrong places. He began to speak less like a strategist and more like a dreamer. His focus faded. His reports came in sloppy. One day, he missed a deadline. Said he got caught up. I didn't need to ask in what. He still showed up, still smiled, still called me Don. But I could see it. The discipline was leaking. The throne he had built inside his mind was starting to sink under the weight of his own indulgence. 2 months later, I got a call. He'd been caught somewhere he shouldn't have been, not by cops. Worse, by our rivals, drunk, exposed, with the same woman. They didn't need to torture him. He gave them names just to get out alive, names of men who trusted him, men who believed in him. By the time we found him, it was too late, not to punish him. That was handled. It was too late to save the man he could have been. You think betrayal starts with a gun to the head? Number it starts with a yes, when you should have said no. It starts with a smile exchanged in a hallway, with a message answered at 2 a.m., with a glance you didn't command. And by the time you realize how far you've fallen, you're already on your knees, bleeding, praying for mercy that doesn't exist in this world. I buried his name. I buried the shame. But I never forgot the lesson. The price of undisciplined eyes isn't just your dignity. It's the destruction of everyone who believed in your strength. You see, when a man falls to lust, he doesn't fall alone. His woman, if she respects him, loses trust. His friends lose faith. His enemies gain ground. His ambitions become ashes. Because every second he spends chasing what doesn't matter, he loses sight of what does. That's why I don't laugh with the boys when they brag about the women they pull. I don't cheer when a man says he can't help himself, because I've seen where that path leads. I've seen the fire burn down homes, not just hearts. And I've seen great men, real men, disappear because they thought their desires made them strong. But desire uncontrolled is a weakness, and weakness in this world is a death sentence. So you want to be a man of value, a man worth following? Then look long and hard at the stories buried in shame, because behind every ruined name was a glance that should have been denied. And if you don't kill that weakness in yourself, ragazzo, it's only a matter of time before it writes your name into the dirt too. There's a moment in a man's life, if he's lucky, where he finally gets sick of his own weakness, sick of chasing what never gives, sick of apologizing to himself for choices he keeps repeating. And in that moment, something dies, but something else is born. That's the beginning of the cold gaze. You see, a dangerous man is not made in chaos. He's forged in clarity. And clarity only comes when you stop obeying your appetites and start commanding them. When the fire of lust no longer blinds you, it illuminates the path you must never walk again. The cold eyes are not lifeless. They're full of restraint, precision. They see everything and respond to almost nothing. They don't wander. They weigh. They don't admire. They assess. That's what makes them terrifying. Because in a world full of men looking for a reason to react, the man who chooses when and if to respond becomes untouchable. Let me explain what that looks like. He walks into the room, and the room goes quiet. Not because he speaks, but because he doesn't need to. His gaze is still, heavy, and when it lands on you, it feels like an X-ray through the soul. He sees the lie before you say it, the fear behind your laugh, the weakness behind your charm, and all the while, he gives you nothing, no compliment, no smirk, no validation. This man doesn't chase, doesn't fidget, doesn't follow the scent of perfume like a dog with no master. His lust died long ago, and with it, his dependence on anything outside himself. He doesn't need stimulation. He is the storm others react to. But here's the thing. He wasn't always like that. No one is born cold. Cold is chosen. Cold is earned. Cold is the result of betrayal, disappointment, self-disgust, and the iron discipline of saying never again. He became this man the day he realized that pleasure wasn't power. It was poison in golden wrapping. That validation was a leash. That fantasy was a trap. And so he severed the rope. One glance at a time, one temptation denied, one night of silence embraced instead of distraction chased. And now nothing moves him unless he decides it's worthy of motion. This kind of man doesn't just win, he reigns. He walks into boardrooms and the alphas lower their tone. He enters conflict and the noise turns to silence. Why? Because you can't manipulate someone who doesn't thirst. You can't control a man who doesn't need your approval, and you can't tempt someone whose soul is already full. The world today is desperate to keep you soft, addicted, distracted, because a man with cold eyes cannot be sold to, cannot be seduced, cannot be controlled. He builds, he leads, he commands, and most importantly, he protects not just others, but himself, his time, his energy, his mind. And you want to know the greatest power of all? It's not money, not fame, not even legacy. It's the ability to walk past temptation without flinching, to see beauty and remain still, to be surrounded by noise and hear only strategy. That is when a man becomes inevitable, not because he wants control, but because he is control. So train your eyes until they obey. Then train your mind until it forgets what it used to crave. And one day, you'll wake up and realize you've become a presence, not a personality, a force, not a follower. And when the world looks at you, hoping to find weakness, they'll find only steel. The man who kills his lust becomes the one others lust to become.